Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting for July 15th, 2020. We'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present. We have one item of old business today, and that is 840 Storage Solutions, a site plan for 32,130 square feet, self-service storage facility on 8.2 acres, zoned PUD, located along Florence Road and Santana Street. The Downs Group LLC is the developer. And Mr. Blomley, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll pinch it for Ms. Green on this one. She's done the lion's share of the work on this. So this was before the Planning Commission back at our May Day meeting for site plan approval. Planning Commission had some concerns and deferred action on the site plan. Primarily, and you'll see from the aerial photo that we have on the screen, the site, which is highlighted, has a particularly important view shed from the on-ramp from 840 onto I-24. And so the Planning Commission wanted more information about what the development was going to look like as you were on that on-ramp, what it was going to look like from that on-ramp. Since that time, Ms. Green has been working with the applicant on getting some exhibits to show to you with regards to answering that question that y'all had back in May. Another issue that was discussed was the buffer and whether or not to buffer along the on-ramp or to have a buffer at the backside of Phase 1. As you know, this site plan approval is just for Phase 1 of the development, and the applicants were proposing to put a landscape screen on the backside of Phase 1 as opposed to along the on-ramp. And our concern was that if they put it on the backside of Phase 1, then that landscaping would have to come out when they built Phase 2. It's my understanding from Ms. Green that landscaping that they are proposing to screen Phase 1 will remain even when Phase 2 is to be constructed, and they're going to come to the podium in just a moment. The design team is, and they can address that. Another issue was wanting to make clear that this particular approval was for Phase 1 only. I think the Planning Commission did not want to give the appearance of a blessing for the entire development, especially as you moved further to south in the site. You would get closer to that on-ramp, and Planning Commission wanted to be able to review the plans as they got closer to that important view shed. And so the developer has submitted a letter, and that's included in the agenda materials, confirming that he understands that if he is to get site plan approval today, it is just for Phase 1, which is the site plan that is before you today. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I'm going to invite members of the design team who are going to introduce themselves and go over some of the exhibits that they submitted to attempt to address the concerns of the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blomley.
My name is Paul Bass, architect, and I also have Matt here with the landscape architect.
That's right, Matt Huff with Campbell Design Collaborative, the landscape architect on the project.
Thank you.
And if there's any initial questions, be glad to address that. But like he was saying, we've got this area right here where we originally had the Phase 1 that was temporary landscape buffering. We are now keeping that intact. So that will remain. And these three buildings that you see right here, we've got Building A, and then we've got a duplication of what we call Building B, and this makes up the component of Phase 1. What you see right here was just kind of a future planning, may or may not happen, or may be revised, and as noted, this will be coming through as a future project in and separate from what we see here. One thing that was asked of us was the view shed, and what we ended up doing is providing, this is dropping everything into Google Maps, geolocating the building from every perspective. And so what we have here, we've got I-24 views, and how do you zoom in?
Escape.
Oh, okay, there we go, perfect. So just so we could zoom in, and I'm a Mac guy, so this is backwards. So this will show you the views in which these are taken. So for instance, view 7 shot this way, view 6 is shot this way. So looking at, for instance, you have zero view with the berm and the landscape of the facility from this view, looking from 60 or I-24 into there as well, there's no view. As you can see coming off of the off-ramp, which is view 5, which is shot from here looking into the site. We have no view due to the topography. They can't even make the top of the roof line. The only views that we have are view 1, and this is just masked in there for representation. We've actually got some, so this is where you start to pick this up, and like I said, this is not a rendered version. It just shows the massing of the building illustrated through there. So from a view shed perspective, when we look at this overall Google map, the only opportunity that you have to see the development is this from this direction right here, because we will be fully screened from the residential neighborhood. In addition, Mr. Luna and his group have this commercial parcel, out parcel, that will be a separate development in the future that will provide additional building, whether it be commercial, retail, so forth of that nature, which will further screen the facility. So when this project gets underway, the only view shed that you'll have would occur from where I'm highlighting it with the cursor right here, looking south on the site. Any questions on that? And then moving, and this kind of gets into some of the renderings that we provided. So from the perspective to the north, this would be the one elevation that you would actually see. Some of the perspectives here, like I said, this area will be developed as a separate commercial or retail development. So in time, all the elevation component that you see from here on down would be covered up, and your view range would be limited to just the retail office component that you see up front on the planned north side. And this is a better view of, that's from looking from the back, but like I said, we've got, and Matt can speak to this is the break line between phase 1 and phase 2, and we will have 100% landscaping screening that'll occur in this area. And this is probably about the extent of the view that you're going to actually have of the site. Like I said, from the planned north side on Santana, looking west, this will probably be the best shot of the development itself on the self-storage side. The rest of it, like I said, will be screened by either landscaping, topography, or just in general future development.
And can I ask, in these pictures that you're showing us here, are these actual renderings of the buildings, or is this just?
Yes, ma'am. They're generalized renderings put together for this, so they're fairly accurate. They may be off a little on the tones just to the color of the monitor, so forth.
But the general idea?
But they're roughly 50% brick, 50% hardy.
And for example, that fencing that you just scrolled by, that picture, is that accurate?
Black aluminum fencing, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Would the landscaping that you're showing be eventually at the height of the fence, or you think that the low level, not low level, but the height that is shown in this picture is probably at its maturest level?
Well, the height, or the landscape that's shown there would not be the only landscape that would be there. There's going to be landscape, there's going to be arborvitae blocking that side of the wall that you're looking at, and those get to 20 feet tall. The reason for putting that arborvitae as close to the building as we're doing it, rather than just along the 840 property line, is because we need that height close to the building in order to provide an adequate screening. If you had those arborvitae out at the 840 line, you're just not going to get the kind of screening that you're going to get with getting those up close. So that's what we're relying on to screen this portion, like this side of the building. Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's see. But to answer your question, yeah, along this fence line, that is about what you would expect. It's just not showing, that particular rendering is not showing this line of arborvitae right here, which will provide the majority of the screening there.
Okay.
Yeah. And those are, I don't know if I said it, those can get up to 20 feet tall or taller, just depending on the specific plant. So.
Other questions for the design team? Okay. Did you all have anything more to? Is that it?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. What other questions and comments from the Planning Commission?
Matthew, were there any other concerns that the planning department had as far as the landscaping and stuff, the views and stuff? Were y'all good with those?
Mr. Smotherman, I consulted with Ms. Green earlier today, and she said that the site plan is in relatively good order. We've been working with them for a number of months on the site plan. I believe Ms. Nola has no outstanding comments on the plan, so from a civil standpoint, it's in good shape.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I mean, I'll start us off. I think our main concern were the view sheds. I think y'all done your best to try to convey what those would look like, and the fact that it sounds like this 20-foot, whatever type of bush or tree you said, yeah, I wouldn't be able to pronounce it anyway, is going to stay there. I think you've addressed the majority of the issues that we asked you to address, so I'm going to make a motion that we approve subject to all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and to confirm this is for Phase 1 only. Okay, so motion and second, all in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much for working with us on that. All right, next on the agenda, we have our consent agenda, so I'll read through those items. First is East Side Village Lot 1, final plat for one lot on 1.9 acres, Zone PCD, located along North Rutherford Boulevard and Yearwood Avenue. Greenland Partners, LLC is the developer. Greenhouse Ministries, final plat for one lot on 1.1 acres, zoned PUD and CCO, located at the southeast corner of South Academy Street and East Sevier Street. Greenhouse Ministries, Inc. is the developer. Kingsbury, Section 2, final plat for 47 lots on 9.62 acres, zoned PRD, located east of Asbury Lane. Kingsbury 156 LLC is the developer. Laurelstone, Section 1, Phase 1A, final plat for 22 lots on 8.46 acres, zoned PRD, located along Las Casas Pike. Clayton Properties Group, Inc. is the developer. Elam Farms, re-subdivision of Lot 3, final plat for 2 lots on 77.65 acres, zoned light industrial, located along Elam Farms Parkway and Elam Road, Prologis LP is the developer. Shelton Crossing, Lot 1, including the re-subdivision of Shelton Square, Lot 132. Final plat for one lot on 11.65 acres, zoned PRD, located along Florence Road and Pointer Place. Old South Properties, Inc. is the developer. Oakland Court, re-subdivision of Lot 3, final plat for 3 lots on 15.5 acres, zoned PRD, located along North Academy Street and East Embry Street, Murfreesboro Housing Authority developer. The Crossings of Three Rivers, re-subdivision of lots 5, 6, 7, and 24, final plat for 8 lots on 0.75 acres, zoned PRD, located along Hospitality Lane, Three Rivers LLC, developer. Tommy Car Wash, final plat for 1 lot on 0.99 acres, zoned commercial highway, located along Memorial Boulevard, Tommy Car Wash, developer. University Villas and Lion Properties, Section 1, final plat for 2 lots on 31.83 acres, zoned CH and RM16, located along John Bragg Highway, Front Street Partners, developer. West Wind, Section 5, final plat for 15 lots on 12.58 acres, zoned RS8, located along Fuji Apple Lane, Cornerstone Development, LLC, developer. Marketplace at Savannah Ridge, final plat for 9 lots on 24.14 acres, zoned PUD, located along Shelbyville Pike, Murfreesboro North, LLC, developer. And last item, Pretoria Falls, site plan for 53 single-family detached dwelling units on 10.5 acres, zone PRD, located along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane. Landmark Homes of Tennessee, Inc. is the developer. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any members of the Planning Commission or members of the staff would like removed for further discussion?
Madam Chair, could we move item M to have some further discussion on that?
Absolutely. So item M will move off the consent agenda, and we will discuss it next. If we leave it off, we'll go ahead and vote on the consent agenda.
It would move to staff reports and other business at the end of the meeting.
It'll move all the way, staff reports and other business. Okay. So item M will be a part of our staff reports and other business. With that, are there any other items that anyone would like removed for further discussion? And if not, we will take a motion on the consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second on the consent agenda, items A through L. All in favor, state aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next is plats and plans. Our first item there is Kimbrough Woods, the Meadows at Kimbrough Woods Master Plan Amendment for 314 lots on approximately 83.4 acres, zoned PRD, located west of St. Andrews Drive and north of Veterans Parkway. KW 53 LLC is the developer. Mr. Ware, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So this master plan amendment has been brought before you today to solve an issue. There has been some flooding of the entrance to the Kimbrough Woods to Meadows at Kimbrough Woods subdivision in the past. What this amendment would do is to close that intersection and create a new intersection at the intersection of Shady Forest Drive and Shady Forest Drive and St. Andrews. With the old entrance, it will be closed. The city will maintain right-of-way, ownership of that right-of-way. The new street will be called Penberry Lane. They have already received E911 approval for that new name change. The new intersection entrance to the subdivision would intersect and connect with Vineland Drive. Well, it's not on the screen, but you can see in your papers, it will connect to Vineland Drive. I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and I believe the applicant's representative is here as well.
Mr. Blomley?
One thing that I would add is that the design engineer has proposed so the existing Genoa Drive west of St. Andrews Drive will have to be renamed because it will become detached if, from the existing Genoa Drive on the east side of St. Andrews Drive with the closing of that intersection to correct those drainage problems. So that section will need to be renamed at some point. That will be brought back to you at some point. The street name that Huddleston Steel proposes, that Penberry Lane, may not be what it ends up being called. It may end up being a continuation of the Community Circle street name that's already there. But that will be something that we will study and get back to you. But it will need to be renamed. And I think there are about 20 lots that would be impacted by that renaming. But the trade-off for that is that the city is going to be making a major drainage improvement at that intersection. And I would like to compliment the developer of the Meadows at Kimbrough Woods and his design team, who have been very flexible in coming up with an alternative design to replace that existing access point into their subdivision, modifying their plans to work with the city to so that they could be flexible with their design in order so that the city could make this improvement. And so that as Mr. Ware said, the whole reason for this master plan amendment is spurred on by the drainage improvement that the city is looking to construct there at the intersection of Genoa and St. Andrews. So we appreciate the developer and the design team working with us to come up with solutions on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any other questions and comments from the Planning Commission? Mr. Ware or Mr. Blomley or any of the development team? If not, we're ready for a motion.
If there are no further comments, I'll make a motion that we approve subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ware. Next, we have our new business. The first item of business there is a street renaming to rename an approximately 700-foot-long segment of East Overall Creek Road to Constantine Drive. City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was kind of just an interesting anecdote while I'm scrolling to the page in the agenda packet, looking for a file number for this street renaming, and I asked Ms. Jaco to create a file and provide a file number, and I said, what's in the 900 series, which are right-of-way files, and she said, I don't think we use those anymore. And I said, well, it may seem that way because we haven't had a street renaming since 2015, so we don't have a 900 series file number since 2015. So it's been a while since we've undertaken a street renaming. I think this is going to be a relatively benign street renaming, though. This is a segment of East Overall Creek Road it's in the tan color on the map before you. The Belmore subdivision is being developed along the south side of East Overall Creek Road. Mr. Alcorn Properties are developing that subdivision. Currently, East Overall Creek Road does a 90-degree turn at its intersection with Constantine Drive. So if you see Constantine over here, you would think that this would be a continuation of Constantine, but no, it's actually East Overall Creek Road. As is the case with roads that are out in the county and sometimes in the city, there is a history of why those roads were named and constructed the way they were. In this case, for some reason, East Overall Creek Road does a 90-degree turn, which is where we would normally see a street name change. And I included a screenshot from Google Earth in your agenda materials. I'll zoom in here's that three-way stop. So if you, this is as you're traveling west on East Overall Creek Road from Old Salem Road, and you come to the three-way stop. Well, if you want to stay on East Overall Creek Road, you actually do a 90-degree turn to the left. And if you go straight, which you would think would be a continuation of East Overall Creek Road, the road turns into Constantine Drive. And you can see there's no line of demarcation. It's basically the same, you're on the same road, but the name change occurs when you turn left. Well, that, as you imagine, that's a little bit of an anomaly, doesn't really follow standard street naming protocol. We annexed that right-of-way several years ago, and Mr. Alcorn received preliminary plat approval for Section 2 of Belmore, which is this large parcel here. I believe it's about another 12 lots, 12 single-family lots zoned RS-15. And there will be several lots on this segment, fronting on this segment of East Overall Creek Road. And so it seemed to be the perfect time to visit the issue of renaming that street, which is about 700 feet in length, because when there are lots, that means there will be homes, and homes have to have addresses. And so it seemed to be an appropriate time to visit this subject before there are lots and homes on that we would have to actually change addresses at some point. So we figured, go ahead and visit this issue now before there are actually homes on this segment of East Overall Creek Road. The only home that's on this segment is a rental home that Mr. Alcorn owns, that is right about where my cursor is on the development tract. That home is to stay on one of the proposed lots. He's actually going to fix that up and make it face this segment of East Overall Creek Road. That home would likely require an address change anyway, so that the number ranges would, so that there would be significant amount of numbers in the number range to make his development plan work from an addressing standpoint. I've spoken with Mr. Alcorn about that. He's actually in favor of the street renaming. I think he sees its benefits to cut down on confusion, and I think he has no issues with the rental home that he has on the property changing addresses. In fact, he said he volunteered to come speak at the public hearing when we had it, to speak in favor of it. So that is the only home that actually fronts on it. What you see to the north is a proposed subdivision, and the streets have been mapped in there by GIS, but those are proposed streets, and there are no homes addressed off of the north side of the roadway. So we would propose renaming this segment of East Overall Creek Road that's highlighted in the tan color to Constantine Drive, which would take Constantine Drive all the way east to Old Salem Road. Haven't done this since 2015, but we will need to, if the Planning Commission feels that this is worthy of moving forward with the public hearing, we would need to schedule a public hearing. The subdivision regulations gives the Planning Commission the authority over street naming issues, so this would be a decision that lies with the Planning Commission. It would not have to then go on for another public hearing at the City Council level. We would notify all property owners that are adjacent to this segment of roadway. Back in January of 2019, the Planning Commission adopted a policy regarding street renaming, that street renaming should be, the street renaming would be appropriate in instances where it is in the public interest and where it would promote the public health and welfare. And we believe it meets the criteria by cutting down on a potentially confusing intersection there at the three-way stop when it turns to the left. And so we as staff are in favor of the change as well, obviously, because we're bringing it to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If the Planning Commission so wishes, we would recommend setting a public hearing for August the 5th for this item.
Okay, any questions or motion?
I'll move that we set a public hearing for August 5th.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is a sign ordinance amendment to amend Murfreesboro City Code, Chapter 25.2, Sections 25.22, 25.24, 25.223, 25.224, 25.225, and Section 25.2-26 for the purposes of, number one, adding a definition of external customer transaction portal and allow certain limited electronic changeable signs at external locations such as ATMs, drive-up windows, and gasoline pumps. Number two, decreasing the time a temporary sign can be claimed and increasing the fee of temporary signs picked up in the right-of-way. Number three, prohibiting certain materials from use in signage. Number four, reducing the maximum allowable size of temporary signs. And five, allowing murals on more than two sides of a building. The City of Murfreesboro Building and Codes Department is the applicant. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Teresa Stevens, the sign administrator. As you said, we're bringing forward several proposed changes to the sign ordinance. We did have a stakeholder meeting on June the 2nd, several in attendance. The first change, or first addition, is adding the external customer portal transaction. As you stated, as an event or an activity or an event that can be measured in terms of money, which affects the financial position or operations of the business entity. Examples include, but are not limited to, ATM machines, fuel dispensers, and DVD rental kiosk. We did this to help us allow and clarify the use of video display monitors at these locations, and also for drive-through transactions at fast food restaurants and other drive-through uses. For this proposal, we have that the external customer transaction portal shall be no greater than 3 square feet and no more than 6 feet above grade. That we're going to require these signs be able to automatically adjust to ambient light conditions. So at night they'll adjust, and at dawn they'll adjust to not, hopefully not have a glare. For the drive-through lanes, the staff recognize that the technology has transitioned such that these types of signs are a benefit to the community and our customers for the city. We're going to propose to allow 1 9-square-foot pre-order board, 1 Venure reader board that's no more than 20 square feet, 1 order station of no more than 9 square feet, and it may include a 3 square feet video display. The signs must be placed between each drive-through lane in the first pickup window. These signs also must be equipped to automatically adjust to ambient light conditions and no greater than 6 feet in overall height. I provided some examples of these in your packet. Do y'all have any questions on these?
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Stevens on any of the sign ordinance amendments?
We also proposed changes for temporary signs to increase the fee to have these signs returned to you when we pick them up in right-of-ways, and decrease the amount of time that we're going to hold those signs to be available to pick up. Another proposal is to decrease the size of temporary signs that are going to be allowed to 16 square feet and 6 feet in overall height, I believe. Yes, that's a decrease in size from 32 square feet at this time. We also wanted to clarify murals, what we consider the front of a building. Murals are not permitted on the front. Right now, the ordinance allows murals on side and rear, and we limit that to 2 sides. But we propose to increase that to however many sides that are not front, building front. Okay. That just clarifies what we mean by that term. And do y'all have any questions on these?
What happens if a building fronts on two different roads?
That's what we clarified in the ordinance,
Okay.
that, so it'll be the road that it's addressed to. So corner lots, if it's addressed to 123 Main Street.
I'm with you.
That'll be the building frontage.
Okay, I see.
We also addressed if there's multiple tenants that may have a different address, that would become their building front, their tenant space. If you don't have any further questions, staff recommends a public hearing date of August the 5th.
Okay. That's probably going to be okay. I was going to ask the question.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
For those who have signs that are 32 square foot out there right now, which somebody might, would this ordinance immediately require the removal of those, or would they be grandfathered in for a short time period or something? How would that work?
Yes, we're going to, David may want to address that, but
We hadn't specifically addressed that. Normally, temporary signs are not considered grandfathered because they're temporary in any event. We could take a look at some time allowance for an existing 32 square foot temporary sign.
Yeah,
I haven't seen them lately, but I haven't been looking for the large ones either. Usually, the large ones have come
I'm
around.
advertising like crazy on those, and you're not noticing them. I wasted my money.
I knew there was a reason for that comment. Yes, I've seen some of them, Eddie, yes.
But, I mean, as long as they get through the election process, there's not very many of them out there, I'm sure.
As long as my sign can, right?
Right. This is all about me right now. Hey,
I think the election will be over before this
yeah,
goes
that's
into
what,
effect, for sure.
that's what I got out of the last part there, so.
Just for clarification, how big are those big signs? Are those 16 square feet, the big election signs?
Oh, no, they're big.
Right now, the largest temporary sign you can have is 32 square foot, which is a 4x8
The ones I've got,
standard 4x8 sheet of plywood.
they're 32. They would be illegal. You'd have to cut them in half and put them side by side.
Interesting. Since we were talking about it, I just clarified.
Does this impact the, temporary construction signs coming soon? Because those are usually,
yes, it will.
so those will have to be smaller as well?
Yes.
But I guess the real question, though, is it immediate? When it does go into effect, is it immediate, or is there, because right now, somebody could have some signs being made, and we're going to put them in a really bad position if they put their signs out, and then right after that, immediately, they're going to have a sign ordinance that's going to be.
Normally, this would go into effect 15 days after it's passed on second and final reading by council.
Would it be okay if we just did a 6-month moratorium on the 32 square foot signs, for example? I mean, that way they would.
So we can get them out there.
Temporary use out of somebody that has already ordered signs, and I'm not talking about the election campaign signs, but let's say somebody's got a business and they've got a temporary sign that they've already ordered and paid for, and they haven't put it out yet.
I think we could do, I'm pretty sure we can do that.
Okay.
Right, we're going to do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, that sounds fair.
So is that something you can change in here, and then we can still go ahead and
We
have an
can-
August 5th?
Yeah, we can change that before the public hearing.
Okay.
I'll move to set a public hearing for August 5th.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Our next item and last item on new business is revision to amendment of McKnight Park Master Plan. City of Murfreesboro Legal Department is the applicant. Mr. Blomley, you taking this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to just say a couple words, and then I'll defer to Mr. Ives.
Okay.
The McKnight Park Master Plan was adopted in 2014. Master plans for, this is kind of tantamount to a general plan or a comprehensive plan or kind of a sub-area plan like we did with North Highland and Historic Bottoms. So it's a master plan for this facility. Another similar example was the airport master plan that went before the Planning Commission and City Council back around 7 or 8 years ago. So anytime that there is a modification to the master plan, it has to, or an amendment to the master plan, it must come back to the Planning Commission, and there's actually a 30-day notice period. So Mr. Ives is going to go over the specifics of this amendment, and we would ask that you schedule a public hearing, but not for August the 5th, because state law requires a 30-day notice period, so we would actually request that you schedule it for September the 2nd in order to comply with that notice requirement. Now, I'll pitch it over to Mr. Ives, and Mr. Ives, if you need me to go back and forth to an example, or if you want to come up here, just toggle with the arrows.
It might be easiest if I speak from here, and I think we can find it with the mouse. What was contemplated back a few years ago was that this area here that's in kind of tan, light yellow would be, was surplus property for the park, wasn't really being used that much for the park, and that the park would, most of the master plan amendment at that time was changing things around the ball fields and the concession stands up here in the heart of the park. But along with it, this about 4.5 to 5 acres was declared surplus property, which we then were going to market. The way we contemplated that was that it would, the excess would butt up against the lots that are fronting on Memorial Drive. This roadway back here at the, I've lost my direction, no, I guess that's the east side of the excess property. That roadway would continue to be a park access road. As time has passed, or an arrow down to the next. Yeah. As time has passed, the situation at the airport has changed quite a bit. This kind of got turned upside down, but we had contemplated, you can see the road up here at the top on this, we contemplated that continuing to be a park road. What has happened since that time is, well, first of all, one of the big things that happened is up off of the map up here to the top left, TDK built a large hangar complex, which somewhat changed the direction of how the airport is being built out now. So that happened, and that's being, his access to that hangar is off of the Jarnett. Also, as the lots were sold that are to the north of Walmart, which are following along where the hand is now, where the cursor is, as those lots were sold and developed, access to the rear of those became important, and so what used to be the intent of keeping the park access road here at the top of this picture has changed, and the park access road is now going to be at the bottom of the picture. It's not fully constructed yet. It's constructed about to the point where the hand is, but it will eventually be constructed on past and to get into the park where it'll be, it can be gated as park access, so the park access can be controlled, but it will still provide access to the, a rear access to the businesses that are fronting on Memorial. Because of that shift, and also where the cursor is now is a maintenance facility that was constructed for the park. That still has access from the top of the picture, and it would be accessed from the new road also as well. Because the shape of the excess property has changed, the size has changed, it's probably just a little bit larger than it was before. The essence is still the same. It's basically the block of property that has been, and to some extent still is used occasionally as a practice field. that's the same property that's going to be surplus, and expected, we are in the appraisal process, and expect that to be, actually, we expect it to be conveyed to the airport now, for the amount of money that, whatever the appraised value comes out to be. So there was enough change that we felt it should come back here to the Planning Commission as a modification of this master plan. Also, as surplus property, now this is not a change. You see where the cursor is going up and down, there's a 60-foot wide strip that was originally part of the park land, and it was, in the past, it was thought that it might become an access to the park. As things have developed, that's not going to happen. That little, we've affectionately called it the finger, is also surplus property, and it has been appraised, and we anticipate that it will be sold to one of the adjoining property owners there on Memorial. And right now, there's essentially there's two remnants, and then the finger itself that are three undevelopable pieces. They're just remnants that you really can't do anything with. Legally, there's a potential use, but as a practical matter, there really nothing you can do with them. So once they're probably all three be joined together, and there'll be a nice developable lot. Be happy to try to answer any questions, and as Matthew said, we'd ask that this be set for public hearing in September.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Ives? If not, we're looking for a public hearing on September 2nd.
So move.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next, we have staff reports and other business, which we now have 2 items under here that we know of so far. First one is a zoning application for approximately 78 acres located along Medical Center Parkway, Robert Rose Drive, Wilkinson Pike, and Willow Oak Trail to be rezoned from MU GDO1 and GDO2 to PUD, Clary Park, GDO1 and GDO2. Hines Acquisitions LLC is the applicant. And Mr. Blomley, you're going to take this one?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
So, Planning Commission considered this item last month at the June 17th meeting to schedule a public hearing. There were some issues that needed to be addressed before the Planning Commission felt comfortable scheduling it for a public hearing. One of those was a lack of specificity in certain areas of the plan development, which Mr. Ives will speak to in just a moment. Since that time, staff has met with the applicants and the design team and continue to work through that issue and several other issues, including related to architecture of the proposed product and transportation improvements, the transportation network, and we as staff feel like we need a little bit more time to continue to work through some of those issues, and we've communicated that to the applicant's representative. And we would recommend that a public hearing for this matter be scheduled for September the 2nd to give us time to continue to work through some of those issues with the applicant. And I believe the applicant is agreeable to that. Mr. Gunther with Reagan Smith will get up in a moment, and I think he'll have a few comments. Another point that I wanted to make, another reason why we feel that it's appropriate to schedule the public hearing out a little bit further in order to be able to continue to work with the applicant is because there is a neighborhood meeting scheduled on July the 28th, and were this item to be scheduled for a public hearing before the Planning Commission on August the 5th, that would only leave about a week for the applicant to incorporate the feedback from the public into their design. And one of the purposes of a neighborhood meeting is to have an open dialogue with the public, consider their feedback as kind of a collaborative process, and then potentially incorporate some of that feedback into the design. The 28th is the Tuesday of the week that the agenda goes out, meaning that the agenda would be published that Friday. Hardly leaves the applicant sufficient time to incorporate that feedback into their design. That's another reason why we feel that it would be more appropriate to schedule the public hearing for September the 2nd, in addition to the fact that that we continue to work with the applicant on some of the outstanding issues. I think we've made progress over the last month, but there is still some necessary discussion on this item. But we as staff would feel comfortable with you scheduling the public hearing on September the 2nd. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. McKnight is here if you have any questions for him. So I'd like to invite Mr. Kevin Gunther to the podium now. I believe he'll have a few comments for you.
Hello, Mr. Gunther.
Hello, Madam Chairman Jones, Planning Commission. Did want to give Mr. O'Shea a chance to address you as well. If you don't mind, I think he'd just like to give a brief summary and his appreciation for the opportunity to be here again before I dive into some details, if that's okay.
Thank you. Mr. O'Shea, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Chairman and Board, thank you for allowing us to come back and present again. We're excited to be back in front of you. We feel like we've made great progress. Thanks to Matthew for that great summary. We're in full concurrence with the staff's recommendation in terms of setting a public hearing out on September 2nd, again, for the reasons he stated, with the timing of the neighborhood meeting, as well as continuing to work with Margaret Ann and Greg and the rest of the team on resolving a couple open issues. So I think we're in great stead. I'll let Kevin go ahead and walk you through some of the substantive changes that we made to the plan. We really were kind of focused in three areas. One was in providing more specificity on the architecture, on the site planning, as well as on the timing of some of the improvements that we're going to do. Second was on a reduction in residential use. We heard clearly from Planning Commission that there was concerns regarding the amount of residential, and so we reduced the amount of area available for residential by 25% and removed the maximum number of units by about 19% in the overall plan. So we made some significant changes in terms of the uses that are available. And then final thing is we've increased the commitment to some of the public improvements, and most specifically Wilkinson Pike. I know Mr. Smotherman had concerns regarding the entrance there, so we've committed to doing turn lanes on Wilkinson Pike and making those improvements with the first phase of infrastructure when we do the project. So those were kind of big picture, and I'll let Kevin walk through some of the details for you, and we've got the whole team here to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And as Kevin comes back up, I will mention that Mr. Gunther provided us with some hard copies for the Planning Commission, so I'm going to go ahead and give those to Mr. Halliburton to pass down while Mr. Gunther speaks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Okay, Matthew, this is the PUD. Is there also, right, is there also the 12 slides we added?
The full PowerPoint?
Right.
There you go.
Thank you. We just wanted to touch on some of the big picture items and some of the specifics. We also want to leave plenty of time to answer questions you have. This image is now on the cover of our submittal application, and the reason I want to show this is it's showing a higher level of detail for what we call the grand lawn. The applicant is very interested in creating a space that is what we say, kind of energized and has a lot of activity going on. So we're trying to depict a better feeling of what that is going to look like in the end. That's the reason for us including this image in the package. And this is using the actual architecture we're proposing for the project. This is using the actual program space that Heinz would propose, and they work very hard at managing that space and providing activities that would be ongoing in that space. As Walt had mentioned, and as the staff had mentioned, we want to point out some big changes we think are very important in response to Planning Commission. Area number 1 and area number 4, as you see the light purple color there, those areas we have specifically removed any reference to residential use. Those will be commercial mixed use, providing for the potential for office and commercial only. So we've taken residential component out of that part of the plan.
Page 13 in our book.
Yes, thank you. Page 13 in your application. And then areas 2 and area 6, we have committed to very specific land use as well. That's single-family attached. And this is where we're going to continue to work with staff on some of the details of how that function and feels. But as far as the land use, we are committing that very clearly. Area 5 and 7, we have committed very clearly as well to allowing for a multifamily with a dedication of a commercial component, minimum of 4,000 square feet of commercial for each of those areas. Area 3 would remain specifically for commercial. So what we've tried to do with this amendment is make it very clear that every area has very specific uses, but we are still providing a mixture of uses throughout the master plan. This is now the rendering of our master plan showing an example of how each area is proposed to build out, and we tried to show a lot more specifics about what was previously left as kind of a blank slate. We've filled in those details and shown what we think is the best understanding of how this could shape out. And this depicts the changes to the land use that I had described as far as what is specifically allowed to be single-family attached, what is allowed to be commercial mixed use, what is multifamily with office component, and what is commercial. There's been a lot of discussion about the transportation network, and we're going to continue to work with those details. We wanted to communicate clearly. This is a diagram we've added to staff that is not in your pattern book right now, but will be included in. The intent of this is to show how that green connection and the pedestrian connection is very important to the master plan. So we're showing how that network not only works with your streetscape, it also works with the green space, even all the way up into the front of the units for the single-family attached, and is an integral part of why we think the overall transportation network works. Because transportation, of course, includes not only the automobile, but pedestrians and bicycles as well. We are showing a very clear picture of what we are proposing for the architecture for single-family attached. This is what's depicted for Area 2. And you can see that we're trying to keep a unity to all the buildings. There's nuances, different styles to the different buildings, and we're committing to having those nuances show up on the streetscape so that you won't have a row of the same buildings all in a row. But as you can see, we're articulating porches, window framings, dormer windows, those kind of things are being committed to in this architecture. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the single-family attached and how that's going to look and feel. So what you see here is Area 2 showing what we call the garden district for the single-family attached townhomes, and we are depicting what we think is a very clear land pattern. We'll continue once again to work out and make sure that utilities and the street network is going to work to the satisfaction of staff. In Area 6, one thing that is new from the last time we were before you is we have shown a very clear picture of another product that we are proposing, and that is the single-family attached, what we call stacked units or vertical townhomes, where one unit might be on top of another, and that is shown in Area 6. And in both of these cases, once again, we're showing where the infrastructure, road networks, and building placements will go. We're also committing some very specific things related to amenities. You see that little red square on the Area 2. That is going to be specifically dedicated for our amenity area. And what you see in the text there is that that would include a pool, paver deck area, shading and seating, and pool cabana. And so we're committing to some very specific things on amenities. We'll continue to work with staff on exactly what is going to be committed to in the pattern book. This picture is a depiction of the open space between the units in Area 2, which we call the garden townhomes. And what we're trying to make sure to communicate is that this is where your pedestrian way and your open space come together. The whole idea of the arrangement of these alley lots is that the surface area, the cars, those are accessing the back of the units, which allows the front of the units to have this type of experience, where you can see we're committing to some green space and pedestrian connections. I'd mentioned in Area 6, we're proposing a specific product for what we call the stacked townhomes. This is the architecture that we are showing relative to that type of product. And once again, you'll see the idea is that we show a lot of porches, fenestrations, dormer windows. It tends to have what I call kind of a larger residential big house feel. We still have some scale that feels very personal, and at the same time allows for the units to stack on top of each other. We're committing to very specific materials on this as well. What's also included in your packet that's new is a list of some of the building construction and design criteria that we are committing to. It includes things like, the aluminum-clad windows, materials of stone, cementitious siding, brick veneer, calling out driveways to be a very specific width. We know there's some discussion about making sure that there would be a minimum of 16-foot drives for 2 cars and 8-foot wide drives for 1 car. So all of those are details we're committing to, and we know that this needs continued discussion with staff, but we hope that we're showing that we're at least getting closer in our progress. This also applies to the multifamily component as well. We're trying to show some very specific design criteria that can be connected with the document once it is a completed PUD and hopefully approved. So as I mentioned, there's a commitment to this ground floor space being office in the multifamily, and we wanted to show with the actual architecture of the multifamily how that could look and feel. So we've added this image of the office space, and there is once again, that's a commitment to make a minimum square footage a part of the multifamily project. And lastly is this 3D perspective of the Grand Lawn. Once again, we feel like this is kind of at the heart of where the open space and the social programming and the public venue kind of all come together. We think it's a very important space, and we're working very, very hard at creating an image that shows the details of what Hines wants to commit to for how that space will be finished. So we know there's more work to do as far as the exact definitions of how and when the public infrastructure is put in. I think we're getting a lot closer to that. We wanted to make it clear, as Walt had mentioned, we are in agreement with the turn lanes in Wilkinson Pike. That's part of Phase 1. We're in agreement with making sure that the road network gets installed in a phase that the city is comfortable with. And all those things have been depicted on a specific page of the PUD pattern book so that it's clear what public improvements are part of the plan and when they happen. So we'll continue to make that a very clear part of the document. So with that, myself and Mr. O'Shea are happy to answer any questions you have, and once again, we appreciate the chance to set the public hearing, and we understand that September would probably be the appropriate, well, it would be the appropriate time to do that if you so choose to set the hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gunther. You may have got questions for Mr. Gunther, Mr. O'Shea, or any of the team or the staff. And your meeting was July
28th? Yes, ma'am. We've just sent out invitations. That'll be at Firehouse 4, I believe, from 6 o'clock to 7:30. Love to see you there if you can attend.
Were there, sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. So those will go out mainly to residents of the Wilkinson Pike area? Is that the way that'll go?
I think Mr. Blumey might
We
identify that.
prepared the mailing list. Normally, we do a 250-foot radius for our public hearings. I'd like to try to cast an even wider net for the neighborhood meetings sometimes, especially when you have a larger parcel that abuts a lot of large commercial parcels where 250 may not get a lot of people. So we did a mailing list for Mr. Gunther to use that was a 500-foot radius around the property. It got a number of the lots on Wilkinson Pike, and I think maybe one lot deep behind that in that county subdivision, as well as some of the adjacent commercial properties as well.
Okay. Ms. Garland?
Were there any changes to the requested exceptions?
Yes, that's a good point. The only change we added to the exceptions is a request to allow porches, eaves, bay windows in the single-family attached product to encroach in the front setback and side setbacks. And the reason for that is it adds a high level of detail to the building, but those type of details don't typically impact your view from the street from a negative standpoint. So we did add that request to the exceptions, but that is the only thing we've changed in the exceptions.
Which of the areas does that impact?
That would impact areas 2 and 6, the single-family attached areas.
So
Is that throughout that part of the development, or is it just in those interior alleyways?
Well, we're still working on the details of the architecture, but it would typically impact mostly your front and side setbacks. You know, where, for example, you might have a front porch coming into your front yard, whatever's established as the front of that single-family building. And then also, you know, if you had a side that was addressing a street, we'd want to allow that to occur facing the street as well, especially if we want to kind of what I call wrap the architecture on those corner units where you have a little bit more detail whenever you're looking at a unit from the street side. Did that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
What other questions? Anything else? We had a lot of comment and question before, and so if we have any feedback, we want to give them before we move it to a public hearing. And if not,
Make a motion, we set the public hearing for September, is it 2nd?
second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you again. Our next item will be the item M that we have moved from the consent agenda. It is the Pretoria Falls site plan for 53 single-family detached dwelling units on 10.5 acres zoned PRD located along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane. Landmark Homes of Tennessee, Inc. is the developer. Mr. Blomley, you going to take this for us?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam
And,
Chair.
let me go ahead and just state, if you don't mind, as I've done before on most of the Landmark Homes, I will abstain from the discussion. I'll go ahead and conduct the meeting, but I will abstain from the discussion and the vote on this item since it has come off the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This site plan is for the Pretoria Falls development, which is a single-family detached development, which is in a horizontal property regime, similar to what Landmark is near completion of constructing along West Thompson Lane called Tuscany. This is a PRD. The council approved the PRD in late 2019 for a total of 55 dwelling units on this property. Show you the site plan of the property. We'll see the property has access both on Asbury Lane and Asbury Road, and it reserves an area of right-of-way here for a future roadway that is shown on our major transportation plan. The major change that you'll see in this plan is that they have decreased the number of units that are proposed. In the PRD, they showed 55 dwelling units, which included 3 detached dwelling units at the end of the cul-de-sac on the west end of the development. They have removed 2 of those units, and now there is 1 dwelling unit in that cul-de-sac. So once you get past that proposed right-of-way, there is a playground and 1 dwelling unit and a small guest parking area at the end of that cul-de-sac. The plans are in relatively good order. We would recommend that any approval be made subject to all staff comments, and that includes the dedication of right-of-way along Asbury Lane, so that there is a minimum of 30 feet of right-of-way on Asbury Lane from the center line of the road to the property line. And that is in the staff comments. So we would recommend that any approval be made subject to staff comments, so that that right-of-way dedication and any other comments will be conditions of approval. Be happy to answer any questions regarding this site plan, and Mr. Nick Wisniewski is here from Landmark, and Mr. Kyle Griffin, the design engineer from CSDG, is here if you'd like them to say a few words or answer any questions.
Okay. Mr. Martin, you wanted to bring this out for discussion?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Mr. Baker, Mr. Wisniewski, thanks for indulging us to sit through the entire meeting, to hang out with us, so appreciate that. Obviously, I was in support and still am in support of this project, but it did catch my eye that with that back tail, one of the things that Gary and I talked about, Mr. Wisniewski, was, I felt like at the time it would be nice if we didn't have those units in the back, but I wasn't trying to take units off the table for you. The primary concern I had was the dedication of right-of-way and the possibility of that future road going through there, and then us having a reasonably sized street to run through and divide that. Now, that may never happen, I understand, but as we got through the planning process, we talked about, the potential cost associated with elevating that back area to make sure it was out of the floodplain, those types of issues. And now that we're looking at it again, and it's got a single unit back there, it really just kind of stuck out at me of, why would we do that? Why wouldn't we rather rid ourselves of that so that maybe that's better long-term for the community as a whole? My simple opinion, it might make for a more attractive development rather than having that single unit. But the other piece of that is because it's an HPR designation, my real concern is whoever gets that back unit back there thinking that's their little 2-acre park that they've got, and it being an issue for folks to come back and use whatever open space is back there. And, I know that, I don't know the grading plan, I don't know how the site's going to be set up, but people will want to access the river if possible. And so my guess is you're going to have foot traffic back there. So I just wanted to bring it up for us to have discussion about. I may be the only one concerned. You may say that's the crown jewel and precious to me, but I just wanted to mention it.
Madam Chair, Kyle Griffin, CSDG. We would have loved to keep all 3 of those lots in the back to have more unity back there so that one person didn't feel like they owned that entire parcel. But limitations on areas that we could cut to compensate for cut and fill in the floodplain, the size of the detention pond dictated that we had to get rid of those 2 lots. It wasn't by choice. The numbers kind of forced our hand and made us reduce the overall lot yield by 2. I hear what you're saying as far as this being the crown jewel. I think every lot on this development is precious to the developer, and they would love to keep every single one. If you want to talk further about that, Nick, you're welcome to.
Madam Chair and members, so originally when this project was started, it was brought up part of 460 units, which after working through the drawings, was reduced to 55, and that's where Kyle came into the point of losing the other 2 back there. So we are now down to 53. Due to the fact that for the last 6 months gone through with staff of the detention pond, the grading in the back, wanting to pull as much out of the floodplain, which we've redone and conformed with everything and where we could come up to with the best usable area to get the yield where we originally started. So the fact of the one single family back there, yes, it is one back there. The original plan was the 3, but of course, in order to not lose the lot yield, this is where all the conclusions were came to, and Kyle had mentioned as far as shifting. There's nothing really that could be shifted around detention-wise, grading-wise, to fit any more back there to fit it. So you would have, yes, one home back there, the prestigious home in the neighborhood. As far as what was discussed before, this is set up from what we did at Tuscany, which is on the HPR, which is governed by a set of CC&Rs through a property management company for the fact of what's owned is what's underneath the footprint as true property. You have your limited common, which would be your driveways, your patios. The rest of the area, including all the side yards and backyards for all other 52 units, would be common area. So I understand what you're saying of, are they treating this as my 2-acre private tract in the back? Legally, no.
Right.
But as far of the fact of to get the yield out, to do what we're proposing, to have that back there, because at the end of the day, the cul-de-sac we have to have the cul-de-sac in the back for fire turnaround, for egress, for safety. So having that home back there is also providing lighting in the back as well, and having a constant flow of traffic to not just be a dead end. So,
It also probably
any,
adds a level of security and safety as far as somebody being present back there in that park area all the time as well. I mean, rather than it just being a isolated area with a cul-de-sac and a turnaround parking at...
correct, because originally, the original plan, there was more than 3, and due to that easement right-of-way having to come through there, restricted that to 3 after we've gone down to 1, but instead of it just being a dead end, as Mr. Smotherman stated, it presents a state of presence in the back. So.
Next to the house, are those parking spaces? What is that?
Yes, there are 4 parking spaces. Kyle, those are?
4 guest parking spaces.
4 guest parking spaces, so including in the yield for the number of homes, the 2 in the garage, the 2 in the driveway, that's the yield for everything. And as you can see, there is that other area back there for the playground, which would be to the south of that home, right after the right-of-way. So that would include the area for parking for when people are coming back there to go to the playground.
Yeah, Mr. Halliburton, I think those guest parking spaces would probably also serve the ability for the residents to be able to utilize the part of the common area that would go down to the river right there.
And the reason why I bring that point, I understand Mr. Martin's comment, but I think by having the parking spaces back there, that whoever does buy that one lot or one house back there is going to understand that that's not their whole property, because you're planting parking spaces right next to it with a park or whatever this is that's back there. So I don't think that, I mean, if those parking spaces weren't back there and the playground or whatever it is, I just think that lends it to that it's kind of everybody's property versus the one individual unit owner's property. Is the mail kiosk there too, or no?
Kevin, can you come on? Sorry.
The mail kiosk is more centrally located by Pretoria Pond with 2 parallel parking spaces.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. I get that. I just, that would be even more reason that it's not a common area if there was a mail kiosk there.
Yeah. Will there be any ability for that homeowner to fence any backyard area, or will there be any designated area that keeps people from coming up right next to the back of their house with their activities that are going on in the park area? I mean,
No, as Nick mentioned, none of the open space outside the home is privately owned. There will be some shorter runs of privacy fence that run parallel to the side of the home that extend back past the back steps to give some horizontal buffering, but no fenced-in backyards for dogs running. There's a dog park for that.
what's the distance on the average unit that's going down one of the streets from the back of the unit to the fence or the property line?
I think you're looking at about 10 feet.
Okay, so technically, they've got about a 10-foot backyard. Would it not make sense to go ahead and put a 10-foot setback on that property so that there's at least some buffer between the common area and the back of their house?
So one thing on that you just said, with the HPRs, because it's a governing doc, because it's one lot of record, If you remember Stratford Hall, okay? Stratford Hall was more alley loads, more fronts.
Right.
But it was given where the 10 feet between the houses was your side yard.
Right.
If you fenced it in, it became limited common recorded with that deed. So we did that same thing at Tuscany on the interior units that had that 10 feet. And the lots that you see that could back up to the tree line if they wanted to fence it in for kids or for the grandchildren or for dogs. You could fence in, say, that 5-10 feet, which would become limited common. So yes, for a fact of on that lot, if, and with the rest of the lots, of part of it to become limited common, so they could fence it in, recorded with the deed, but they still don't own it, but it can delineate from the rest of the 2 acres or wherever you were saying, so yes, to still get
Right,
that privacy?
I just see a little bit of problem with such a large common area that's used as an access to and from the river where people are going to be running down through there. Somebody just basically coming up and sitting in your 2 foot from your back door and saying, I'm okay here. Technically, they are. I think there should probably be a 10-foot buffer or something behind that property that would be a limited common area, I think you're referring to it as, that would give that particular unit some protection from whoever parks in these 4 spaces and goes back and forth to the river. Because I'm assuming they're going to go down and kayak and stuff like that at that location, and if that's...
Yeah, so similar to the buffers, of course, that are adjoining additional properties, which are according to city regs, but coming up with a private buffer that's on the plans, that's part of the master plan, that would shield that or articulate it off. Is that what you're after?
Yeah, I think that kind of gives the person who's buying the home less feeling of this is my entire yard.
Agreed.
But at the same time, it also, for people using that property, which is a common area, it kind of keeps them off their back porch. And so...
Doable, right?
So,
Very much so.
Mr. Smotherman, just to clarify, you're talking about maybe a little larger fenced-in, limited common area behind that unit.
10-foot setback or something, 10, 12-foot setback that would give them a fenced-in area behind that home that would...
I'm no lawyer, but I happen to know one, and I think that they could create limited common area that could accomplish that.
They could do that, yes.
I mean, we're not talking a huge expense, are we? I mean, to
No,
the
sir.
developer. I mean...
It's easily doable.
Is there going to be a directed path getting back to where you have access? Meaning,
all about that one home.
if you, to the river, because if you have a directed path, then that will keep people from really wandering over towards this house and being a nuisance to the house.
I'm going to let Kyle speak on that, because after that cul-de-sac, the reason that a lot of them were pulled out of there is because of quite a bit of topo.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let him speak to that if you don't mind.
Maybe the topo will help us get there.
Yeah, on this current plan, there is no trail or sidewalk or path back to the creek because it slopes down at 3-to-1. If we can, there might be an opportunity to put something back there, but it would probably require some sort of stairs to get down the hill, which is not really ideal for a lot of people, but it's an option.
Okay.
And if we did that, we would situate it off of that house slightly.
So, but then is the most natural directed path then for people to go towards the house because it's easier?
We've got a detention pond between the parking places and the street.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is it's going to be to go towards.
Push you towards the house.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
escape, and then you can zoom into that back area.
I think we could probably meander something around the detention pond, out of the 10-foot limited common area and down to the creek.
I mean, just a gravel path or something like
Yeah,
that.
it doesn't,
where the
well, I'm not
vehicles
talking about
are parked.
concrete, just something simple.
Mr. Martin?
I think I've made my comments. I think I'm probably not comfortable approving it with that single unit, just because I probably feel like that it could be pulled, that it wouldn't hurt the project. I actually felt the same way when there were 3 units back there, but I probably would have pressed that for 3 units. But with a single unit there, just my personal opinion, I probably wouldn't be for it, so. But that's just me.
I'll make a statement. I'm kind of in the same camp as Councilman Martin. My concern with this is that is possible thoroughfare, but also my second concern would be that this just seems like an afterthought, that this one home by itself does not seem as though it's part of the cohesive design of the rest of the neighborhood. So for those reasons, I would probably be a no on this.
Since we're forming opinions here, I guess I got my BZA hat on here just a little bit. So we deal, on the BZA, we deal a lot with, you got odd-shaped lots. Is it self-created? You know, what can you do on the lot? I know that we talk a lot about density. And I think that in this particular case, the developer has done what they've actually reduced units. So if the BZA was looking at this, we would say that you could almost make the argument that it's not self-conforming because, it didn't do it on its own because of the lot shape, the fact that the topography, that the flood zone, that they had to put the pond here, all that kind of stuff. And so that was really the only spot they could put the house. And so that's the kind of the way that I look at it. And I think if they can work through how you would guide people in and around to get into the creek or the river or whatever, I don't even know what is there.
It's Overall Creek.
Okay, so Overall Creek, I would be in favor of it.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
I think that's a great point. One of the things I didn't mention, just because I wasn't going to, I didn't want you to think I was beating up on you, but that lot number 22 and lot number 23, so at the bottom of the plan, if you're pulling in the driveway of lot 22, you're, I don't know the scale, but you're right in somebody's backyard when you're pulling into that particular unit. So when I see that, I didn't particularly like it. I wasn't going to make a big deal about it. But what I see is you did as much as you could do to force as much density in the project as you could. Not faulting you for that. I understand the yield game. I understand why you want to do it. But when I see that, and then I see that single unit back there, I'm thinking, well, it looks like you put as much as you could put as everywhere you could possibly put it. My simple opinion, you didn't have to put that single lot in the back. That's just me. If it were 3 or 4 or 5 units, to me that's a little different, but it already looks forced. And again, I'm not in support of your project. It's just that change to the plan probably alters the way I look at that single lot. So.
Can I ask for clarification for this what happens here. So when they vote or make a motion or whatever they do they have the option here of approving, not approving, or saying, I approve with this one change? Or can you kind of go through what the different thought process would be right here? Because I'm kind of lost on whether, I won't say any more,
Yes, ma'am.
since I'm abstaining.
So the options are to approve as is, approve subject to the written staff comments, approve subject to the written staff comments with any additional conditions that you may have. The two potential ones that I've heard so far have been the 10-foot limited common, 10-foot fenced-in limited common area behind that solo unit back there, as well as a path, a pedestrian path down to the creek. And then denial would be another option, and then deferral for a period of time agreeable to all parties would be another option. Denial, I think that they have the zoning entitlement to the plan that they submitted as a part of their PRD package. So I think that they would be entitled to come back to the Planning Commission with a revised plan. And I would think that we would probably waive the required 18-month waiting period after a denial, because it is a plan development and they do have a zoning entitlement for a certain plan. And it would be a matter of submitting a revised plan. So I think those are your options. Approve as is, approve subject to the written staff comments, approve subject to the written staff comments and any other additional comments from the Planning Commission, deny outright, or defer action.
Madam Chair? After a brief consultation, I think we are okay at this point with dropping that last unit and leaving the cul-de-sac for a connectivity turnaround.
Talking about doing it here and having...
It's not big enough.
Then never mind.
Never mind.
Yes.
I mean, that satisfies my concern, so I mean, I'd be willing to make a motion to approve it, subject to staff comments and the 10-foot right-of-way, or the, I guess the right-of-way you talked about, the 30-foot right-of-way is in this staff comment.
That is in the staff
Hold on,
comments.
so clarify the never mind.
Yeah, clarify the never mind.
The thought...
Are you saying never mind with respects to taking the
Never
house
mind with
away?
respects to taking the house away.
That's what I thought. Okay.
We were going to try to squeeze one in here, but there's already not enough room to fit a full cul-de-sac at this location. So the cul-de-sac can't move any closer to the pinch point.
Yeah, I go back to the legal classes that we go to down in Nashville occasionally, and they often talk about imposed conditions and self-imposed conditions. And this is a situation which is a perfect example of what you referred to as something that the developer had no control over the shape of the lot. So the question is, can you develop the lot? And then technically, I think there's supposed to be grounds as to why you can say that you couldn't approve it due to the conditions that the lot presents itself. I actually think if the road cuts through where they've left the space there where there's the pinch point, that if you don't have the home back there, then that cul-de-sac is no longer part of the planned development itself, which means that you're not using that green space as credit for the development. You're not using the retention pond or detention pond, whichever that is, as part of the project. And so I think you've changed the entire project if you eliminate that section of property off of the entire development. And truthfully, I think that if you have the cut-through street and you have no homes whatsoever back there, none, then basically you've got a cul-de-sac with a parking place on it that then becomes not really part of the neighborhood, but just a area, place where kids are going to go hang out or something that has no supervision whatsoever. With one home back there, if somebody's out there at night that probably shouldn't be out there, then I'm assuming that homeowner is going to call the police and say, hey, there's a situation out here in front of my house that y'all might want to come check on. So I don't think we're trying to create a hangout spot by building a cul-de-sac with no homes back there and parking that accesses down to the river. So I personally think there's an advantage to having the single home back there. I mean, and like Ronnie says, I mean, I think it'd be great if there were two homes back there, but I don't think there's really space for two homes back there. So, I mean, I would personally be in favor of it as it's presented, because I think they've faced a challenging situation and done the best they could with that situation. But
I have a quick question. If we add the requirement for the fence, and somebody buys the house and wants to take the fence down, can they do that? And vice versa. If they buy it and they want to put a fence up, can they?
Yeah, I think that might be difficult. Perhaps a fence could be required on the front end, but I think if that 10-foot area is left as limited common area, then the future owners, whatever they're comfortable with, if they wanted that to be fenced in, they could have it fenced in. If they wanted it to be open, they could pour a patio over the whole 10-foot wide area and leave it open. And that would, to me, a patio would signify that this is my.
But even like a 4-foot picket fence or something like that would be an open area going back to it without having a privacy fence.
I just want to make, my opinion, since we're giving opinions, is that I also am okay with the house there. I feel like this could be somebody's dream lot compared to the rest of the lots on here. So, then they will have to live with what they purchase and know what the constraints are. And I think whatever the wording is that I would be for would be to allow them to have that flexibility to pour the patio or put a 4-foot fence or put a 6-foot fence or take it down if they decide.
Right.
So, Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, because with this being an HPR, it's one lot of record. There are no individual lot lines. So, we cannot put a separate setback. However, we do have a landscape plan for the community, which is mostly around the buffers. Since it's all one lot of record, if we went back and said 15 feet out from that home, 10 feet over to the side and up, we had a landscape buffer, which was part of the development since it's one lot of record. Whether they put a fence in or a patio, we're creating that buffer.
I don't know that what they're asking for is like a landscape barricade around that area, but just kind of something denoted in the HPR as a limited common element that belongs to that unit that they could treat as their own little backyard, could possibly as a patio, possibly fenced in if they wanted to.
What you wouldn't want is the person put a grill back there behind their house, and then they walk out the back door and somebody from the neighborhood's out there using it.
Correct. So what we can do, because we are the owners of it entirely, so instead of waiting until that customer closes on that home, we can go ahead and record with that deed on that property X amount by X amount of limited common to that space recorded with that deed as part of this process, and it's in the record as the recorded plat is.
Yes. You want to say anything, Warren, before I make a motion?
No, I actually, when you talked about the landscape buffer, I actually like the idea, because then it delineates. But, I mean, either way, whether it's the landscape buffer or whether it's a recorded deed.
Either or, we'll do either.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't think you want a landscape buffer that's so tall that it blocks the view back across that area if the person in the house wants that area. Like, I mean, I think that You know, the thing to a fence, if you just say fence and don't define the fence, then all of a sudden it could be a small picket fence, or it could be not a chain link fence. Those are so ugly. But maybe a black.
You haven't got a copy of the CCNRs yet, then?
But if you just say fence and leave it at fence and don't go into definition on the fence, then perhaps anything from a picket fence to a true 6-foot privacy fence would be the option of the homeowner. So
With the CCNRs, they'll be the same, they're already done, ready to record, they'll be the same at Tuscany. So you either have a 6-foot vinyl privacy or the 6-foot black aluminum. That's what's allowed, those two. That's it.
Mr. Halliburton?
All right, I'm going to make a motion that we approve with the addition of the pathway somehow around the detention area in this house. And then I get a little confused here, but with respects to the 10-foot, what do we call it?
Common area.
Limited common area.
Yeah, limited common area, and I guess they would work out the fence piece or the landscape piece, and then subject to all other staff comments.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Two opposition and one abstention.
passes 3-2.
4 to 2.
4 to 2.
Not counting myself.
On your toes. Okay. All right. We good? All right. Thank y'all very much. Appreciate it. And again, sorry you had to stay through the whole meeting, but we appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot. All right. Other staff reports and business for today?
I have none.
I have nothing.
Done. All right. Then we stand adjourned. Thanks very much.